Hello crafty people, and welcome back to my channel. I'm back here with a new card for you today, featuring what was a Creative Expressions stamp from Andy Skinner, and I believe that they will now be becoming available through Katie Sue, still under the Andy Skinner brand. So I thought we would make this little card today, and just for a change I'm actually going to break out my watercolor paints in a pan rather than using pens and ink pads, etc. But you can absolutely get this effect using whatever you've got, be it watercolor pens or use your ink pads or anything like that. So we're going to have a go at painting something like this very quickly, and the beauty of it is that it is kind of a rustic and sketchy kind of a stamp, which means that we can get away with a lot. We haven't got to be too careful about it. So just to bring in the stamp that I've used, here is my original version. Hopefully some of you might already have this or have other robot stamps that you could do something similar with. If not, keep an eye out on Katie Sue Designs. You may well find that these will get re-released at some point, so well worth having a look. But I'm making this actually, or the one I've made is for an anniversary card, and we're just going to recreate the actual painting part of that card. So bringing in my image, as you can see, it is quite large. It's bigger than the picture on the front of the stamp. It's let me grab it out for a moment. It's made of red rubber, which is quite unusual, and it has a sponge foam backing, so it's really good, gives a lovely nice impression. I would recommend you use it with a stamping platform though, because we're stamping onto watercolor card in this case, and I just used the standard Crafter's Companion watercolor card for mine, but importantly it is textured, so you might need to do one or two stamps to actually get the full image pressed into that paper. So as you can see, I've already gone ahead and stamped my image onto a piece of card which measures 5.5 inches square. I did actually cut mine down a little bit in the end to make my final card, but this just gives you the space to work. And of course, if you want to tape this flat to something so that you keep the card flat, you've got room to do that as well. I'm going to be bringing in my water and my paints. My paints happen to be a set from Altenew. Let me have a look at the app. There we go. On the lid it says so there. And they're a set of, I don't know, about 30 colours. You can use whatever you've got, but I just like these because they've got a nice colour variation within them. I honestly don't know if you can still get them, but because I've had mine for a long time. But they're just a really nice set of colours, so you use whatever you've got to hand. I'm going to try and fit as much of this as I can into shot, but I will also have some water ready to use, which I'm going to just put out of the way a little bit, and a cloth which I can use to dab off any excess, and also some scrap card. Preferably, if you can, the same sort of card as you've been using. So this was an offcut from my piece of card here. So I'll just put that to the side, and then I'm using a round brush. This is a size 8. It's one of the old Sheena ones, which are quite nice for loose watercolouring because they hold a lot of water. Any round brush will do, but the nice thing to look out for is a brush that comes to a nice round point, which means that if you want to, you can get into detail without having to keep getting a different brush. So without further ado, let's get going. And looking at my palette, I've actually well, when I first got this, I did make a swatch of all my colours just to get an idea of the colours that there are, because sometimes the pan looks quite different to what the actual outcome is, so that's always handy to have. And I'm going to start off by layering a layer of grey on my robots. So the first thing I'm going to do is just taking my water, get my brush nice and wet, and using my chosen grey, I'm just going to get some water in there and reactivate that ink. Sorry, that paint even. And then I'm just going to take some out and just put it in my palette to the side here. And I might add a little bit more water, and this is where my scrap of paper comes in. The best saying is, if in doubt, try it out. So I've got my scrap of card and I'm just going to test it and think, okay, is that how I want it? And it pretty much is, to be fair. I just want a light wash. And so what I'm going to do, I haven't put any water onto my card or anything. I'm just going to start adding some of that colour onto my lovely robots, and I'm just going to cover the whole robot really with the grey, just to get a layer down. And this one over here as well. You can see I'm not being too careful about it. I like the way that this is sort of sketchy, because that means we can be nice and relaxed about it. So you see that didn't come out exactly the same colour, and that's okay. I'm going to use some of that darker colour just to add some shade here and there. It was exactly the same colour, but I just didn't water it down as much, and that's how we get the differentiation. But what you can do, if I want to just lighten up this body a little bit, is take some tissue and just blot some of that away, which will bring it back a little bit lighter again. And if that still doesn't work, I can just take some plain water, add that on there, and blot again, and gradually lift up some of that. Okay, so now I'm going to just get some more of my dark grey, add a little bit more, and just maybe start to add some real darker splodges. And because it's wet onto wet paint, that's going to mix in a little bit more. Maybe just do some of these in the hands, around the what would be their ears, I suppose. There we go. And I'm also going to use that same grey, bring it down onto these tin cans, and then maybe a little bit here and there on the ground, but not all of the ground. So I'm just going to put a little bit of base layer in there to start with. And that's how we've begun our robots. And although I'm sort of kind of using the same technique, you'll be surprised that they're each going to come out a little bit different. Now what I'm doing is just taking plain water now and just blotting, just to sort of take away those edges a little bit and just help that paint to work a little bit harder. So I'm really just playing. It's just being relaxed about it and not thinking, oh, this has got to go here and that's got to go there. We're just playing with it and letting the paint run where it wants to go. And that's the beauty of having a brush that holds plenty of paint and water, really. Okay, so that's our beginning. If I bring in my original one, you can see this one I actually probably went a bit paler, although in actual fact this will lighten up as it dries. But we have got tints of rust and tints of patina in our two characters, so I'm going to go on to that next. So for my sort of rusty colour, I'm picking obviously a rusty colour and doing the same thing, picking up some of that brown, and let's just put that in there. Give it a little test on my bit of paper, which was just off shot, but let's bring that in. So there's my rusty brown colour, and taking that, I'm not going to paint specifically, but I'm just going to start to dab in some rust in the darker areas. And if I think it's just needs to move about a bit more, I'm just going to bring in some water as well. But you can see once it's sat there for a second, it does start to move around. And I might just put a little bit in here. So he's going to be a little bit rusty. And then once again back to my water, I'm just touching. And if I feel like it's getting a bit carried away, I can just blot. There we go. And suddenly I've lifted a load of that out of the way. There we are. And let's give him some on his body as well. And that's just going to give him some delicate colour to add interest. And all of a sudden he looks like he's coming to life a little bit. He doesn't look so flat. And often the key to watercolour, to get something looking a bit more alive, shall we say, is not to keep adding different shades of the same colour, but to add a different colour in there, so that it looks like it's reflecting off its surroundings, or that it's just not totally plain. And again, where his hands are, where his feet are, we can add some more. Just pick up a little bit more. And if we leave that be for a minute and let it do what it wants to do, we can always come back and maybe add a little bit more if we feel like we need it. But you get this lovely sort of granulated effect with virtually no effort whatsoever. And I'm going to make the tin cans a bit rusty as well while we're here, so let's grab some more. Might be a bit strong there, but there we go. And once again I can go back with plain water, so I've just wet my brush and then just dabbed it off on my cloth on the side. And I may pick up a little bit more grey. So again, I'm just backwards and forwards, just adding what I think I need. Now for my little girl, I want her to have a more sort of patinaed kind of look. So I am going to go with a bluish colour, and but a bluish green colour, shall we say. And I'm picking up this one here, which can you I put it out of shot. There we go. Let's pick up, whoops, wrong one, picked up some more. On the actual pan it looks very, very dark, but in reality it comes out as a sort of greenish blue colour. So perhaps we'll try that one. And again, we'll water down and test it out, and we end up with a sort of green, a turquoisey blue colour, which is the kind of thing I'm looking for. Meanwhile, this will have dried out a bit, this grey on this side, so we'll have to just start applying a bit of colour. We'll probably have to bring in some water as well. Just help that reactivate and mix in there. And again, I'm just dabbing, and if it's not moving, I'm just dabbing water as well, just to bring in that extra little bit of movement, just letting it spread. So this is, again, I might have said this already, sorry if I'm repeating, but this is why it's nice to have a brush that holds water when you're doing this sort of loose watercolour effect. The Royal and Langnickel paintbrushes, which I use if I'm doing sort of detail character painting, they wouldn't be so good for this, because you'd be constantly trying to renew the water. Because for that kind of painting, when you're doing detail, almost, you know, doing precise colouring, you want the brush to be almost dry. This is the opposite. You want it to have, you know, a reasonable amount of water on it, so that the paint will grow and spread on the card in front of you. So there we go. We've got our nice little robots. And if we like, we can go back and add a little bit more grey, just for a bit more drama. and that will mix and give us another colour once again. So let's leave that to dry for a second. We will come back to the eyes in a moment as well, just to add some character there. But now I'm going to take a brown colour, but a different brown. I'm going to go for a nice soft earthy brown, which is going to be this one here. And I'm going to use this to create some ground. So again, I've picked it up, watered it down a bit, and then added some to my palette. And let's just test. Yep, that's nice. And really, I'm just swiping the brown across the floor, not worrying about what's on the floor. I'm just adding it on there, and I've pretty much covered up my original grey, but that's okay because I can go back and get some more of that and then bring in the grey on the top. That was a bit dark, so let's just bring some water and water that down. And what that does again is add some texture and variation to the ground. So there we go. And I think I want to come in a bit stronger with my brown as well, so I'm going for a more thick version of that and just add some of that in there. Again, that looks a bit of a shock at first, but I can go back to my water. I can soften that out. And once again, if I want to lift any of it, I can use my tissue just to take off some of that excess. Okay, right, so meanwhile, these are still quite wet, but they should be good. I'm going to get something in on those hearts. I want the hearts to be a kind of red colour, so I'm going to pick a red from my palette as well. And I'll just put that up there. And I'm basically just going to paint those hearts in. And this is where the point comes in handy on my brush, because I can sort of get in a fairly detailed fashion. And paint that heart shape, which just adds a pop of colour. I also want to give them some nice blue eyes. So let's see, do I want to use the same blue? Why not? I'll use the same blue that I used on my little girl. And again, taking a thicker version of that, I guess you might say, or not. Might add some more paint there now. And just touching with the very point of my brush. Just going to paint around those eyelids. And I've just left the tiniest little bit white, which is just a little spark of reflection. There we go. And now they've got blue eyes to go with the rest of them. And I just added a little bit of more of that darker blue onto the feet, just for a little bit of shading. And I'm going to add some darker brown onto his feet for a bit of shading. And the next thing I'm going to do is to create a little bit of a loose background around them. So let me just swap my palette around, and this time I'm going to go for some lighter blues, which are different to this sort of greeny blue that I had for my little girl. So you probably won't be able to see it, but I've picked a really pale blue. I'm just going to put some of that down. And when I actually apply this, it is so pale that you will hardly be able to see it. But basically, holding my paintbrush quite far away from the nib so that I've got a very relaxed approach to it. I'm just going to start adding some of this blue colour. Now, because my water's a bit sort of dirty, it's mixed a bit with the dirty water, so it's coming out a bit more browny, and that's fine. And when my paintbrush starts to dry up, I'm picking up a bit more water to go with my paint. When my paint starts to run out, I'm just going to grab some more and some more water, and I'm keeping this very sort of loose and watery really, and just scribbling around to create an idea of just something going on in the background without actually having a scene. And hopefully it's just going to move and just take its own shape without making a solid edge. And then I'm just going to find another blue just to bring in some contrast, and so I'm going for a sort of mid brighter blue now, and that looks quite shocking, but what we're going to do is use plenty of water. And sorry, that is a bit off shot, there we go, you can see it there. And just picking some up again, holding my brush the same way, far away from the actual brush head, I'm starting to blot in some of this extra blue. And again, I can go back to my water and just add the water to help that move around. So you can see absolutely no skill whatsoever here. And remembering to go into the area that's between the two of them. And we can come back with our water as well. So even if I try to do this exactly as I did my previous one, it's not going to come out the same, because watercolour is its own master. It's going to do its own thing. So you have to kind of just go with it. So in the end, I've got kind of a darker looking background there. I'm just trying to find a little bit, last little plain bit of this tissue. Again, I can pick up and blot, and that actually adds some interesting texture as well, so that's really nice. And now the next thing we're going to do is just leave this and allow it to dry. So I'm going to pause for a second while I give this a quick blast with my heat gun, and then we can come back with some nice finishing touches with a little spot of pencil. Okay, so I've allowed my card to dry, or in my case given it a blast with a heat gun, and my picture, you can now see how it's turning out. And you might think, okay, that's brilliant, I'm going to leave it at that, I'm quite happy with that. And if so, that's brilliant, it's got texture, it's got colour, it's got everything you might want. But if you want to just take it another level further, you can do by just adding a little bit of pencil. So it doesn't really matter what kind of pencil you use, as long as you've made sure that your card is completely dry. In my case, I am using Ohuhu Halawa pencils, which are oil based, and that means really that you can't add water and blend them, but you could use a watercolour pencil or just a regular colour pencil, because all we're going to do is add just the tiniest little bit of detail on here just to further enhance it really. So you can see that I have picked a sort of teal blue colour, a slate grey and a brown, which kind of goes with what we've been doing here. And I'll start off with my brown, and because this is textured paper, it's going to take the pencil really easily. So what I'm going to do is very lightly just go into some of those areas and just add myself a little bit of extra detail. And that can either by just drawing, you know, lines side to side, or as I'm doing here, just adding little circular movements, and I'm applying no pressure at all. I'm just letting the pencil rest on the paper and moving it, so that it kind of just goes over the top but maintains a little bit of translucence on there. But what it's doing is adding that little bit of depth and shadow in addition to what you already had. And I'm not worried about a perfect blend because, like I said, this is you know, it's meant to be sort of shabby looking, so you know, I'm not worried about whether it blends perfectly, and that's why it doesn't really matter what kind of pencil you use. So now I'm going with my grey and adding a little bit more. You can use grey and brown, or one or none, it's really up to you. I'm just having a little bit of fun with it, and then I've got a tiny little detail there, so I thought I'll add a little bit there as well, just to colour that in. And of course their legs are so tiny, you might want to do something with their legs. So I've made my arms and legs brown on this one, and on this one I'll make them grey. And for our little girl, we can come in with our blue and just further enhance some of those blue areas if we want to. And really you hardly need any, because we've already laid down probably a fair amount of paint at this point. But you can just add a little bit here and there, and we can give them a little bit of character. We can add a little bit of almost an eyebrow sort of effect if we want. Which makes them look even cuter. And I can just bring in some more brown down here as well. So once again, we're just chopping and changing, putting it in wherever we feel like we need it. And you know, I can just go into these tins as well. Maybe put a little sparkle of blue in there. Maybe I'll have a bit of blue in this one as well. Just adding a little bit of interest. And I might even just put a little bit of my blue on the ground, which just helps to bring it all together in terms of the cohesive colour. And there we have them, our lovely little robots. So all I did in addition to that was, like I said, I cut this down to size. I think I made it, do you know, I don't even remember. Let's have a look. So about 11.5 centimetres square. I've cut that down, and then I've just scribbled a border around the edge using my fine liner pen, which is this here. So I'll tell you what, let's just give it a cut down. I'll just cut down and I'll come back to you just to show you how to do the border in case you haven't seen that before. There we are. So I've trimmed down my piece of card now. It's actually about 12 centimetres square. And now I'm taking a fine liner pen. I like to use a uni pin, and this is a 0.3, so sort of medium thickness. And I'm just going to loosely hold my pen and just pull it down the edge of my card, going around all 4 edges. Not worrying about if it wobbles. In fact, I kind of want it to wobble. I don't want it to look like I've drawn this line with a ruler. I kind of want it to be quirky, especially as it kind of matches the line work of the actual stamps here. And then I'm going to go over those same lines again, or in the same direction, and as I pull my pen down, I'm going to just do some wobbles. And I'm not doing them in a uniform fashion, I'm just letting them happen as and when they like. And for me, that kind of gives just something a little bit different, really. Which is kind of like an electrical signal or something like that. I feel like it kind of goes with the robots rather than being something girly and sweet. So there we are. I've completed a border, and then basically, because my card's now a little bit wobbly where I've been drying it and everything, it's a good idea to leave this under something flat and heavy just to give it a flatten down, and then you can go ahead and mount it onto another piece of card. And the beauty about these is that they're kind of, the simplicity of them means that you don't have to do too much with them to make them into a lovely card. So that's what I did here. Simply mounted onto a piece of black card and then onto I think this is a 6x6 card, and then you've got something really nice. I can add a tiny sentiment down here or in the middle if you want to, or just leave it plain. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that I will be getting my paints out a bit more in the future, so do give me a thumbs up if you would like to see some of that. I'm kind of thinking about doing some loose scenes and that kind of thing. But if you're stuck with me this far, hope you enjoyed this little session. Thank you for watching. Love it if you would subscribe or maybe even give me a like, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.